The clatter of silverware filled the dining room, punctuated by Evelyn's laughter as she told another story about her friend's luxury vacation. Daniel nodded along, occasionally chiming in with his smug little jokes, while my grandchildren stared at glowing screens, the glow of their phones brighter than the candlelight Evelyn had insisted on for her perfect family dinners. I sat quietly at the end of the table, my hands folded in my lap, chewing slowly, speaking little. It wasn't that I didn't have words, it was that no one wanted to hear them. I had cooked most of the meal myself that afternoon while Evelyn criticized my outdated recipes. She wanted trendy dishes, glossy enough to post online. But when the roast came out tender, when the bread filled the house with warmth, they ate it without thanks, without even a glance in my direction. I had become invisible in my own son's home, a silent shadow at the table. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments. From where are you watching this video? Halfway through the meal, I tried. I cleared my throat and said softly, "You know, when your father and I first bought this house..." Daniel didn't even look up from cutting his meat. He dropped his knife, glared at me, and barked, "Shut up, Mom!" The room went still for half a second, but only half. Evelyn snickered, raising her glass. "He's right, Margaret. Nobody wants a history lecture with dinner." The children didn't even glance up, too absorbed in their screens. Daniel shoveled another bite into his mouth, his jaw tight, his words final. I sat frozen, my chest tightening, my eyes burning. A lifetime of memories, sleepless nights rocking him to sleep, meals I skipped so he could eat, the jobs I worked with bleeding hands so he could go to college, collapsed into that single moment. "Shut up, Mom." The humiliation was sharp, but beneath it, something else stirred. Not grief, not just anger, something firmer. Slowly, I placed my fork on the plate, the sound of metal against china louder than it should have been. I pushed back my chair, my knees aching but steady. Daniel glanced at me, irritated. "Where are you going?" he asked, as though I needed permission. I didn't answer. My eyes landed on the keys to the old Buick resting on the counter by the door. My Buick, the one I had driven for years before Daniel insisted on taking it over because Mom doesn't need to be driving anymore. I walked past them, each step stronger than the last. Evelyn rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she muttered, but her voice wavered when she realized I wasn't stopping. My hand closed around the keys. Cold metal, solid, real, more real than their words, more real than the way they erased me. I turned back to the table. Daniel was glaring, confused. "Mom, sit down. Don't start something." I looked at him. My son, who had reduced me to silence, who thought his command was the law in this house. And I said nothing. I simply walked out the door. The air outside was sharp, cool against my face, cleaner than anything in that suffocating dining room. I didn't look back as I slid into the driver's seat. The engine coughed, then roared to life. My hands gripped the wheel, steadier than they had been in years. Behind me, through the window, I could see them moving, shouting, Evelyn's hand flailing, Daniel rising from his chair. But I didn't stop. I backed out of the driveway, the headlights sweeping across the walls of the home I had sacrificed everything to build. "Shut up, Mom," he had said. And so, I shut the door on them. I shut down every sacrifice, every memory, every chain they thought held me to them. I drove into the night, my heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to freedom. They thought I had nowhere to go. They thought I was too weak, too old, too dependent. But they had forgotten one thing. Silence doesn't mean surrender. My son said, "Shut up, Mom," at the dinner table. So I stood up, took keys, and never came back. The road stretched out in front of me like a ribbon of darkness, the headlights cutting tunnels through the night. My fingers gripped the wheel tighter than I expected, but there was no trembling, no second guessing. The farther I drove from Daniel's house, the lighter I felt, as if each mile peeled off another layer of the humiliation I had carried for years. The Buick hummed beneath me, steady, faithful, the only thing left that hadn't turned its back on me. I didn't even know at first where I was going. My hands followed instinct more than direction, steering me through the old parts of town, past places that carried echoes of a life before Evelyn's sharp tongue and Daniel's cold commands. I passed the diner where Charles used to take me after long shifts, the church where we used to sit in the back pew, the park where I pushed Daniel on the swings until the sun sank low. My chest ached with memory, but it wasn't regret. It was clarity. By midnight, I pulled into the cracked asphalt lot of a roadside motel, the neon sign buzzing faintly in the dark. I paid cash for a room, the clerk barely looking at me, and carried my purse and a small overnight bag inside. The room smelled faintly of cigarettes and bleach, the carpet thin, the wallpaper peeling. But it was mine. No one barked at me to shut up. No one rolled their eyes when I spoke. I sat on the bed, the silence pressing in, and for the first time in years, I let myself breathe without fear of being interrupted. My phone buzzed. 10 missed calls from Daniel, a string of messages from Evelyn. I didn't answer. I turned it off and placed it face down on the nightstand. Sit. The next morning, I woke to sunlight leaking through the blinds. My reflection in the bathroom mirror startled me. I hadn't realized how small and dim I'd allowed myself to become. My hair mussed, my face lined, but my eyes, they looked sharper than they had in years. Alive. I drove into town and parked outside the community center, the same one where I'd once volunteered years ago before Evelyn decided my time was better spent babysitting her kids for free. The director, an old friend named Joanne, blinked in surprise when she saw me walk in. "Margaret Hayes? My goodness, I thought you disappeared," she said, her voice warm with the kind of kindness I'd forgotten existed. "Disappeared," I murmured, smiling faintly. That's exactly what they wanted. Joanne listened quietly as I explained. Not every detail, just enough. She squeezed my hand. "You don't need their permission to exist, Margaret. If you want, you can help out here again. God knows we need steady hands." I agreed, and just like that, a piece of me I thought had been buried came back to life. I spent the day folding donated clothes, helping unload boxes of food, listening to the chatter of volunteers who treated me like I mattered. No one called me baggage. No one told me to shut up. By evening, I drove to the small bank branch where Charles and I had kept our joint savings. My heart pounded as I asked the teller for account information. The young man scrolled, then looked up. "Mrs. Hayes, everything's in your name. Looks like withdrawals have been made recently, but the core accounts are untouched. You still have control." Relief and rage hit me at once. Daniel had been nibbling at the edges, sure, but he hadn't realized how much power I still had. He thought I was dependent. He thought I had nothing. He was wrong. Over the next week, I quietly transferred funds into a private account, one Daniel couldn't access. I met with a lawyer Joanne recommended, who assured me that as long as the house deed and accounts were in my name, Daniel's hands were tied. He couldn't throw me out, couldn't strip me bare. If anything, he had been living off my kindness. Meanwhile, I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances. Evelyn had started complaining loudly at her book club about being abandoned with an ungrateful old woman. Daniel had confided to a coworker that his mother had run off in a tantrum and was probably begging to come back soon. They had no idea. Back at the community center, I found myself becoming useful again. Children laughed when I read them stories during after-school programs. Volunteers asked for my opinion, valued my experience. One evening, as I packed bags of food for families in need, a young woman touched my arm and said softly, "You remind me of my grandmother. You have the same strength in your eyes." Strength, a word I hadn't been called in years. But as much as I was rebuilding, I hadn't forgotten Daniel's sneer, his barked command. "Shut up, Mom." He thought those words buried me. He didn't realize they planted me instead. By the end of the second week, my plan was forming. It wasn't about courtrooms or wills. That was too easy, too small. It wasn't about freezing accounts or selling property behind his back. No, this would be something different, something personal. I wanted Daniel to feel the silence he forced on me, to choke on it, to live in it. So I made one final move. I arranged to rent a small apartment above a quiet bakery in town, signing the lease in cash. It wasn't large, but it was warm, welcoming, mine. I filled it with the things that mattered. My photo albums, my books, Charles's old tools. Everything else? I left behind, just as I had left them behind. Daniel's house, once propped up by my presence, was now stripped bare of my patience, my care, my money. I knew it wouldn't take long before the cracks showed, and when they did, I would be nowhere near that dinner table. They thought I would crawl back. They thought I couldn't live without them, but soon they would see who had really been holding their lives together all along. And the silence I left in my place would be louder than any words I could have spoken. The first cracks showed sooner than I expected. It was only 3 weeks after I left when Joanne leaned across the folding table at the community center and whispered, "Your son came by here yesterday." My breath hitched, but she gave me a sly smile. "He was asking if I'd seen you. Looked desperate." I said nothing, just kept folding clothes into neat stacks, but inside a strange calmness spread. I'd known it was coming. They had grown used to me being their quiet servant, their invisible backbone. Without me, the house would rot. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. Dozens of missed calls, messages piling up like unpaid bills. "Mom, where are you? This isn't funny, come home. Evelyn is furious, don't embarrass me like this. And then, if you don't come back, you'll regret it." I smiled at that last one, shaking my head. He still thought threats worked. 2 days later, Evelyn herself showed up at the community center, storming past volunteers with her heels clicking like gunshots. "Margaret," she hissed when she spotted me. "What do you think you're doing? Hiding here like some runaway? You're humiliating Daniel." I looked her in the eye, my voice soft but sharp enough to cut. "No, Evelyn. He humiliated me. All I've done is remove myself from your table. You'll be fine without me, won't you?" She sneered. "We need you back. The house is falling apart. The bills are piling up. The kids keep asking where you are." I interrupted with a small smile. "Then maybe Daniel should tell them why. Tell them what he said to me." Her face flushed red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping on shore. She left without another word. But I knew the truth now. They weren't worried about me. They were terrified of losing what I provided. By the end of that month, word had spread through the neighborhood. Daniel's mask of the perfect son had slipped. His coworkers whispered about his mother living alone in town, thriving, while he begged her to come back. Evelyn's friends whispered about how odd it was that she suddenly couldn't host her lavish dinners. Their perfect image cracked, and they couldn't patch it without me. One evening, as I left the bakery downstairs with a loaf of bread still warm in my arms, I saw him leaning against my Buick. His shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Mom," he said, his voice raw, "please, just come back. I can't do this. Evelyn can't. The kids." I stopped a few feet away, the bread tucked against my chest. "Do you remember what you said to me at the dinner table, Daniel?" His face twisted, shame flickering in his eyes. "I didn't mean it. I was stressed. You know how I get. You said, 'Shut up, Mom.'" My voice didn't waver. "You reduced me to silence in front of your family, in the house I gave you, over the meal I cooked. And for once, Daniel, I listened. I shut up. I left, and I will never sit at that table again." He stepped toward me, desperate, reaching out. "We need you. Please, don't do this." I tilted my head, studying him, this man who had once been my little boy, the one I had held against my chest when he was sick, the one I had protected from the world. Now he stood broken, begging, and I felt nothing but the steady weight of freedom. "You don't need me," I said finally. "You need to feel what it's like without me, and that's exactly what you're going to get." I walked past him, the smell of bread warm in the night air, the sound of his breath catching behind me. I never looked back. My son said, "Shut up, Mom," at the dinner table. So I stood up, took keys, and never came back. And when I didn't, he finally learned that silence can be the loudest answer of all. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.